Okay, guys, very quickly, I wanted to go on a giant rant about this, but I don't have enough time to make a rant, so please just listen. If you're asking me if I've done your question yet, or if I'm going to do your question, just wait, the series is not over, and also be sure that I might have already answered a similar question already. I plainly stated in my first video that I wasn't going to give credit to everybody if they asked repeat questions. I plainly stated that. Also, if you're giving me questions in the video comments, stop. The question submission period is over. It's been over since July 4th. Just stop asking me questions. I said it was over a million times now. I'm sorry for those who are just now joining me and who haven't realized that, but it's just something I gotta say right now because it has been over for a while. That's all I want to say. Let's get to the questions before I go insane. David Tang 12314 asks, when you grow old, do you think that you will keep up with the video game industry by buying new generation consoles, or will you give up on video games? Well, as long as game companies like Nintendo, for example, keep up the uh, process of trying to attract casual gamers and different audiences of gamers, I think that I could possibly be buying and playing video games for a very long time. I mean, I have a few older relatives who have never really played video games before, who have really gotten into games on the Wii, like Wii Bowling, and for some even Wii Golf. So it's entirely possible for older folks and the older generations to get more into the newer generations of video games. Uh, if I really will be playing video games till I'm very old, I don't know for sure because that's obviously something we just have to wait and see if that happens or not. But interesting question. Thanks for asking. Brother Egghead asks, if you had one choice of video game to play for the rest of your life, what would it be? If I had to pick one game to play for the rest of my life, it would probably be Super Mario World. That's a game I could just never get enough of. I play that game all the time. It's a very fun game to just play through, and that's a game I'd love to end my life with, or my life of video games with, because it's such a great game to play, and I've always enjoyed playing it. It was my very first video game, and I hope it's also my very last video game, too. Such a great game. Mario Fan 1300 asks, what is your most hated game to play back when you were a kid? Whether it was tedious, repetitive, or just plain annoying. Well, when I was a kid, there was one game that I had called Zombies Ate My Neighbors for the Super NES. If you know about that game, you probably already know that it's a pretty awesome game. But when I was a kid, I couldn't play that game at all. Like, it was way too hard for me. I could never get past, like, the 5th or 6th level. And I could just never get very far in that game in general. But a few years ago, I actually picked up that game again and started playing through it again. And I gotta say, it's a really fun game. It's still very hard, but it was definitely really hard when I was a kid. It was a game I could never get past. But for the most part, like, that's probably the game I struggled with most as a child. But it's a pretty good game now. Gummy Hack asks, if you got so mad at a video game, what would you do? Well, usually when I get mad at video games, I either say a curse word or I stomp my foot really hard against something, usually the floor. And sometimes I'll like slam my hand against a wall or table or something. Don't worry, I don't do it so hard that my hand would break or my foot would break or anything. But it's just, that's all I would do. I wouldn't throw a temper tantrum or anything. I wouldn't throw things out the window. I wouldn't commit a felony or anything, but I would maybe get a little angry. Not too much though. Snack Attack 8 says, if you could visit one video game world in any video game, what would it be? I would probably visit the Mushroom Kingdom, because there's so much you can do there. You can play golf, you can race, you can go on adventures to save princesses. I mean, the Mushroom Kingdom has it all. Pasta King asks, if you had the power to erase one video game character from history, who would you choose? I would probably choose Meg from Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. She had no purpose for being in that game. She was a terrible character, and I never want to see her face ever again. Scalar X42 asks, what's your view on the console wars? I really don't have an opinion on the console wars. If I had to have one side, I'd probably side with the Nintendo Wii. But, I mean, I'm not going to go ahead and say that the Wii is the best console or anything. I really don't use the console wars to judge on which system is the best. I think each system offers a different variety of different things. And a person should be able to decide which system they like better based on those qualities, but I don't necessarily think that one system is really any better than the other. That's just my viewpoint on the console wars. Loren123 asks, in your opinion, what video game is the worst of all games in the world? Well, I really don't like to give my opinion on games I haven't played, so I'm not going to answer with E.T. for the Atari, Superman 64, or Aquaman. I'm actually going to answer with a game that I think is terrible, but it's also a game I've played before. The game I'm talking about is BattleBots Beyond the Battle Box for the Game Boy Advance. When I got the game, I was really into the BattleBots show that used to show on Comedy Central, but when I got the game, I really wanted to get rid of it because it was so bad. The controls were horrendous. Customation was near impossible. And it was just a terrible game. I never want to even see that game again. So terrible. Go watch a YouTube video of it. Go search that game. There's a very funny video where they make fun of it, I think. So, yeah, go look up that. It's a very terrible game. And that's all I have to say about that. Woody2300000 asks, what video games do you recommend to play for bored people that are about strategy? Well, some of my favorite strategy games are usually a lot of games made by Intelligent Systems. Intelligent Systems makes a lot of games for Nintendo. And if I had to pick a few franchises, let's see. Fire Emblem, definitely. A lot of good Fire Emblem games. If you're new to the franchise, I'd consider maybe trying to get Fire Emblem Sacred Stones, or if you're pretty familiar with the game, and if you have watched my Let's Plays, you could probably go up to Path of Radiance, Fire Emblem 7, just known as Fire Emblem in North America, by the way, and Fire Emblem Radiant Dawn. Other strategy games, I really recommend the Advance Wars series on the Game Boy Advance and DS. There are 2 Advance Wars games on each of those platforms. All of them, from what I hear, are actually pretty good. So definitely recommend those. And if you're interested in more like real-time strategy almost, where it's not like just moving units on a grid and more like actually moving these units around and like attacking with them, definitely recommend the Battalion Wars franchises on GameCube and Wii. I think there's one game on each, so those are just some strategy games I would recommend. I also really recommend the Civilization series. I think Civilization 2 and 3 are very good games, and I've heard a lot of good things about Civilization 4. I haven't played very much of it, but from what I hear, it's a really good game. You can get all those games for PC, so, yep. Nikki's Game Reviews asks, what is the hardest boss you've ever faced? In my whole life, hardest boss I've ever faced was probably Emerald Weapon in Final Fantasy VII. Mostly because for the longest time, like, I had no idea that underwater materia actually existed. So, like, I could never beat the boss in enough time, and I'd always die, so it was a very difficult boss fight for me. A few years ago, I finally learned how to actually get like some of the best materia in the game, and after a while, I was actually able to beat that boss fight, but it had me stuck for the longest time. I even beat Ruby Weapon before Emerald Weapon, and I think a few people actually consider that fight to be even harder. But yeah, that's what I have to say about that. SBB Tournament Man asks, What your opinion on games everyone is jumping all over place? Well, they're a bit jumpy. They're kind of crowded. I really don't know. Clayman from Hell asks, where can I find the Maze game? You can find the Maze game by going to my first Maze game video, and then clicking the download link that is in the video description. I put a link to the Maze game there. It is a game you do have to download. You don't find it online at a game site or anything. You actually have to download it. I don't recommend downloading it unless you have Windows XP. And do not download it if you have Windows Vista, because it has a very, very long history of crashing whenever a Vista user tries to play the Maze game.